Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Hello, all you citizens of the world, and welcome to another edition of Live from the Heartland. This is number 160 since the beginning of the pandemic. It's for the week of July 8th in the year 2023, and we are recording it on both the 4th of July and the day after. We have two really good interviews today. We have the writer, Rus Bradburd, all the way from Belfast, and we have our state representative, Kelly Cassidy, who's just back from Wyoming. And so I'm not going to do a lot of opening banter today. I'm just going to read a poem that I wrote on the eve of the 4th of July in 1975. And I had just arrived in California, and I wrote this poem. I found it in my Sierra Club calendar. It says, "A 4th of July message to my people. America, it is the eve 4th of our bicentennial, and we find that the bottle has let us down. We are still singing Trouble in Mind, but the sun will shine in our backyard someday, and in the front yard too. In fact, right in through the front door. We will no longer be singing more songs of sorrow than of joy, for the time will come when we, the people of this land, in unison with people from all over the world, will let our collective lights shine. Let it be." Okay, there's a lot going on in the world. Pay attention. It's really important that you're involved. And if you want to get a little good information that other people are doing, stay tuned for the next hour of Live from the Heartland. Let's start off with our good friend Rus Bradburd, all the way from Belfast, Ireland. Short musical break, and Rus will be here with us. Be right back.
Oh, yeah. Now, you see, it's a story about a long time ago, about my daddy. He used to tell me how he used to work real hard during the day, and by the time he get home, he'd grab that old guitar, sit out on the porch and play him some blues. Yeah, he said he's a blues man. I worked outside until the sun went down. Boss man worked me till I was worn down, but I'm a blues man, playing my guitar when I can. Sweating all day, doing the best I can. Tell it like it is, Billy.
Hey, everybody. We're back with more Live from the Heartland for the week of July 8th. I'm really excited and happy to have one of my best friends on the show today, the one and only Rus Bradburd. We are recording this on the 4th of July in the year of 2023. And I'm in Chicago, and Rus is in, I think, Belfast. And it was only 3 weeks ago that Rus dropped me off at a hotel in El Paso. We had just finished the 31st year of basketball in the barrio, and I knew he was heading to Ireland, and he's over there. What are you doing over there, Rus?
Well, I was over here. I've lived over here a couple of times, but I'm in Northern Ireland working on a book project. It's a funny, unusual story, not funny, but an unusual story. There's been an influx of Syrian refugees in particular, but also Sudanese and Ukrainians. And, the Northern Ireland is just 4% of the UK's population, but they get 21% of the refugees. And so the town has changed quite a bit because of the refugees in totally good ways, to my eye. But many of the children of these refugees, the parents want something for them to do, get them involved in any games or sports. And so they're sticking them into Gaelic football. and the sort of the cousin of Gaelic football is a sport called hurling, which is somewhat like lacrosse, somewhere between lacrosse and soccer and rugby, but it's played with sticks. And Gaelic football is sort of a cross between soccer and rugby. They're both speed games, but they're traditional Irish sports, and so it just seemed like an unusual story to me that these children, just the way parents in America might have if they came over from Germany in the 1950s or wherever, you stick the kids into Little League baseball or Pop Warner football or whatever it is to assimilate the kids. And so it's an interesting phenomenon here, and it's largely because the refugees have this terrible violence behind them, but the Belfast has this terrible violence behind from the trouble, what everyone calls the Troubles, that mostly ended when the Good Friday Agreement came in 1998. So it's just it was surprising to me that people would go to Belfast looking for a peaceful way of life. At one time that would have seemed absurd, but now it seems to be working out, and it's through sport. As you well know, the sport is often the bridge to bringing cultures together.
Well, let me give folks a little background. I used to own a place that many of the listeners or viewers to the show know, the Heartland Cafe. And I don't know, I imagine you were a customer there. I know you had gone to Northport Park College, and you were a recruiter for basketball teams. You ended up working with Haskins and Henson, two legendary coaches. Your brother lived with an old friend of ours, Bob Rudnick. And at one point, you invited me to go to basketball in the barrio in El Paso, and I've been going there now ever since 2001 or so. My wife, Paige, and I did come and visit you in 2005 in Tralee when you were coaching a professional team, the Tralee Tigers, which went on to win the basketball championship, the pro basketball championship in Ireland. But you were also working on your first book, which was Paddy on the Hardwood, which was kind of a memoir of you coaching and learning the violin. And so with all that said, one thing I noticed in Tralee was the number of non-Irish white people. Just back then in 2005, there were a lot of Africans there, other folks. I was kind of impressed with that. And So I'm going to ask you, why is it, do you think that Ireland has 21% of the refugees who are coming and the rest of Great Britain has only a small percentage?
Yeah, well, at that time I was in the Republic of Ireland, and there was a huge influx right as I was leaving. It was actually 2004, but right when I was leaving, or the year I was leaving, there was a big influx of Polish immigrants because they were part of the European Union, and that gave them the right. There's much more work in Ireland than there was in Poland, I guess. But I'm in Northern Ireland now, and I do think that Northern Ireland is sort of always been seen with disdain by Great Britain and by the English. Is they don't have any great love or affection for Northern Ireland, and I think it's cost them a lot of money and a lot of heartache and a lot of problems, but they can't quite seem to let Northern Ireland go. And some people are, and of course, there's a loyalist side of people here. About half the people in Northern Ireland desperately want to stay as part of the United Kingdom, and they're called loyalists here. And the other side are nationalists, people that want a national unity on the island of Ireland. But I think the refugees are getting dumped. We do this in the United States, of course, where we dump nuclear waste. It's often the poorest of the poor that get things dumped on them. And I think in this case, or think about when Boston was first thinking about desegregating in the 1970s, it was the poorest areas that they said, well, we'll put the kids from South Boston in with the poorest kids from Roxbury or wherever it was. I don't know Boston very well, but it's often the poor people that bear the brunt of it. And what they've done here is they're putting refugees into the middle class, working class neighborhoods, but they have a few interesting things that they're doing that I think is really smart. One is they give them free housing. Another is they give them a small stipend. But there is no Syrian neighborhood in Belfast, even though there's a strong Syrian community now. I think there's 700 or 800 Syrians here now, but there is no Syrian neighborhood. And you might remember this, Mike, from our time together in El Paso. El Paso, I think, whatever the percentage of African American was in El Paso, it's a town of 700,000 with something like 40,000 African Americans in El Paso, and there's no black neighborhood. And there's never really been a black neighborhood in El Paso, or not for the last 70 or 80 years. And there's good and bad that comes out of that. But one way is, I think, because there's not a Syrian there's a Syrian community, but there's not a Syrian neighborhood, if that makes sense. So I think they get together on the weekends and that kind of thing. And one thing it does is it forces you to sort of, we've got to all get along here and figure out how to live together. And it's through sport, I think, that in my view, that it's happening in spades here in Belfast.
Rus, who are the Syrians who are coming? I mean, are they all people who've been driven out of their land? Are they more middle class in Syria who could still get out?
Yeah, it's the ones who can. It's the ones who can afford it, and that's a really good question, because it surprised me as I was talking to. I was actually, they're often, they have whispered to me and said, that Belfast is a perfectly nice town, perfectly safe, but they've whispered to me and said our house was much bigger than this in Syria, and when I was interviewing a woman from Sudan, and I just sort of I must have said something that gave her the message that I was making some assumptions about how she'd clawed her way out of poverty to come here. She said, well, I was training to be a lawyer back in Sudan, and a young woman. And so I think in our part of the world, near the border of El Paso, we often have the idea that it's often the poorest of the poor that are leaving Venezuela or Guatemala or Mexico. They're starving to death on their farms, and they'll do anything to get over. And I do think there's an element of truth to that, but that's not the case here. It's often asylum seekers that can point to, and so in Syria, it's people fleeing the Assad regime and fleeing the violences. And it's for the ones I've met, the only ones I've met have all been Sunni Muslims, and of course Assad is not a Sunni, he's Alawite. So I'm learning quite a bit about Syria, quite a bit about Ukraine, and quite a bit about Sudan, and there's even one Nigerian who's at the center, really an important Nigerian story that's at the center of the book. It's a book project.
So we want to talk about the book project, but let me just go back to who are the refugees. And I'm going back to El Paso, because I would bet that, the people seeking asylum, and we've all seen lots of pictures and news articles. I would bet that they had better means than a lot of poor people, let's just say. But you had a situation where you had an encounter with a family from Venezuela. How does that fit into all your stuff right now?
Well, that one surprised me as well. Is that it was right before I came back here, Mike. I think the key to all of it is, I'm going to hold it up here for your listeners, aren't going to be able to tell, but your viewers will. This is an iPhone. And if you don't know if you're not savvy on the phone, and I'm not great at it, remember with COVID, and there were all these things you had to do to get your COVID, in order to travel, you had to get this on, you had to download this and upload this. And that if you're not fluent and well to do enough to own an iPhone and know how to use it, like if you don't know how technology works, you're screwed. And that's true with everyone, but with the United States and United Kingdom. But I think I was sitting on my porch one day, which overlooks a tiny park, as you know, and there was a family sitting there, and I was just, just not doing much, just sitting on the porch having a beer. And I thought, geez, it's getting dark and they haven't moved for over an hour. And it dawned on me with all the people coming across the border in El Paso, which is just 40 miles away. So I went over and asked them, and they were Venezuelans, and they were asylum seekers, and they had their papers, and yes, we're going to sleep in the park tonight. Well, it's always very nice in the park by our house, especially this time of year. It's not too hot. The mosquitoes aren't out yet, but the sprinklers come on at 11 every night. And it drenches the park. And I knew what was going to happen. They were going to get washed. So we stuck them in our little tiny guest house that you've stayed in, of course. And they wanted we wanted them to stay, but they have a court date in New York in February, and they wanted to go to New York City. And I think it's probably a little bit like your first time in Europe. Where did you go your first time in Europe, Mike?
My first time in Europe was to visit you in Tralee. And my first encounter was a forced march. We got off the plane, we were exhausted, and you took us on about a 10-mile hike.
Yes, and it was just so you'd sleep well that night. But well, most people when they go over think, well, I want to see Paris and I want to go to London, and no one is saying, no one goes thinking, I want to go. No one thinks of going to these smaller towns like Las Cruces, New Mexico. But our feeling was they could find a home in Las Cruces. They could send their kids to bilingual school, and he could find work. And we were shocked and disappointed. We gave him as much hospitality as we could, and the whole neighborhood was involved. But they wanted to go to New York, and the neighborhood all got together, and we all chipped in and flew them off to New York. And right away from day one, day two, maybe day two, it's like, I have to use Google Translate because my Spanish isn't great. It's better than most, but the Venezuelan Spanish, of course, is slightly different. But I'm getting texts that says, there's nowhere for us to stay. It's overcrowded. We left the shelter. There's nowhere to eat. Do you know of anyone? I said, wrote back, said, I don't know of any jobs in New York. I know people in New Mexico. Now, if it was Chicago, maybe I could have helped. So we worry about them. They had 3 beautiful children, but they have it in their head, and they have a court date now. But my understanding, of course, is that most of the asylum seekers, they get denied asylum, and you're back off to you're going to either get shipped back or you're going to go live underground.
You also said to me when this was first happening that people couldn't work. They get released. They're on their own. But they are not allowed to work. Whereas you're telling me that what Great Britain has in Northern Ireland for refugees from a number of countries is they not only give them a place to stay, give them a small stipend, and they probably would allow them to work too, right?
Well, they give the adults get the equivalent, and I might get some of the facts wrong here, so my apologies to your listeners. That there's probably a lot of people out there who know more about this than I do. But
sure.
They get about the equivalent of $40 each per week per adult. But if they're asylum seekers, what any asylum seeker wants in Belfast is to become a refugee, to have refugee status. Asylum seeker is the first step, and then if you get refugee status, and the next step would be citizenship. But some of the Syrians, there's a Syrian resettlement plan, and some of the Syrians are coming over, and they were able to skip a step, and they are able to work right away if they can. But the language is an issue, and so there's an awful lot of teaching English to refugees now or to asylum seekers now that happens all the time. But the danger, of course, Michael, is imagine if you left the United States and you're a restaurant owner and a photographer and an actor. But that doesn't mean if you go to Syria that you're going to get to be a restaurant owner, a photographer, and an actor. You might be driving Uber, or you could be washing dishes. So virtually, I would imagine that most of them are not coming over as highly skilled labor, and if they are, they're not going to get to do. They're not going to live their dream and do their life's work. They're just fleeing a war.
Rus, I'm going to want our listeners, our viewers, to know that you are an author with a number of really great books. I mentioned Patty on the Hardwood. You did a book on Nolan Richards, The 40 Minutes of Hell, which is a great, biography and a lesson in race for a lot of people. Your most recent book is All the Dreams We Dreamed, about basketball and people getting killed on the west side here in Chicago, focusing on our friend Sean Harrington. Talk a little bit about your newest project, because I know it's you've been deep into it for a while. You're over back and forth to Ireland, to Las Cruces, and a little bit of Chicago. What are you doing over there now? How many people have you talked to, and what are some great things to share with us?
Well, one of the things about All the Dreams We've Dreamed, looking at the gun violence in the world of Chicago basketball, it was a dark and depressing book. And so one of the first writer I ever met was the great John Conroy, who uncovered the police torture stories that first ran in the Chicago Reader, but and helped end the death penalty in Illinois. And Conroy's a real hero to me. I know he is to you too. But I used to think, how can Conroy do this? Like, it's just, he walks down, metaphorically and literally walks down such dark alleys, and so the All the Dreams We Dreamed was a really sad and depressing book, because I don't see any end to the violence in Chicago, although Sean Harrington, as you know, is much more optimistic than I am. But what I'm working on now, what I'm doing now is going around interviewing the refugee families, usually the parents, because the kids, don't quite always have the perspective that the parents do. But then also, so there's this terrible violence behind these families, usually in Syria. I'd say 60% of the book project I'm on now is about Syrian refugees. But there's also this terrible violence behind people in Belfast, and nearly everyone has been touched by the violence. Just as if we go to the west side of Chicago, everybody has a story to tell about someone they know who got killed, or their best friend whose friend got killed, or hardly anyone has not been touched by the violence. And it's the same in Northern Ireland. But what complicates things is that many of the people involved in Gaelic football here have complicated pasts themselves. What the Good Friday Agreement did, many Americans don't know that one of the repercussions of it is they let everybody out of, even if you killed someone, you were let out of prison on the Good Friday Agreement, and everything is forgiven, a little bit like South Africa, with one major exception, which I'll talk about in a minute. But there's no holding. Yeah, but what he did was really terrible. So there are people that murdered people were let out of prison. And for the most part, it's been a success. And it's not like they've gone back to. So, for example, I've met a man named Pat McGee, who's trying to learn the Irish fiddle, but he was the Brighton bomber. He tried to kill Maggie Thatcher with a bomb, and he put it in the Brighton Beach Hotel. It wound up killing other people and damaging. Did not get that. They narrowly missed her, but he's walking around. So for us, it's inconceivable that it happens once in a while, like because of people like John Conroy and what they're doing at Northwestern University with the Innocence Project. Is there are people that are getting out of prison that were falsely imprisoned. But what they did in Belfast was they let prisoners go free that had been convicted of murder. And there's some of these people that were involved in the violence are involved in Gaelic football now. And so for us, if you want to coach Little League baseball, there's a background check, right? We don't want anyone around our 10-year-olds that that got caught shoplifting a few years ago, or that kind of thing, and probably for good reason. But that we have to be careful about that. But in Ireland, there's a different mentality. And so you might remember when I was in Tralee in the Republic of Ireland, not in Northern Ireland, not in Belfast.
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear on that in the beginning.
Yeah, but the lines are blurred to many people. But there was a man named Martin Ferris who I coached his son in a couple camps, and Martin Ferris had gone to prison for running guns. Running guns from Boston to get them to the IRA. He did a 10-year prison sentence, and when he came out, he got elected to the Senate, to their Senate. He was a
senator back when I came and visited you over there.
Yes, so we in America we would have a hard time imagining. Although Bobby Rush is a good example how occasionally it can happen. That Bobby Rush was involved with the Black Panthers, which was arguably quite a bit different than what Martin Ferris was doing, but occasionally people can get themselves into trouble in America and come out and have a rebirth in politics. Sometimes we don't want them to have a rebirth in politics, which I won't get into now. But in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, some of these people that were in prison with for Republican nationalism to try to unite Ireland are seen as heroes.
How is the book coming along? We got 5 minutes. Let's focus on the book.
Well, I'm about 150 pages in, and I'm flirting with. I don't want to jinx it, but I'm flirting with a publisher now that I'm hoping will make an offer on it. One of the things I've struggled with is it a book for an American reader, or is it a book for an Irish and UK, you're more of a European reader? And I wonder, I think you're an unusual guy, Mike, in a lot of ways, but you understand Brexit, you understand the Troubles, you understand, maybe you don't have a great understanding of Gaelic football, but the reader is going to have to get at least briefly, going to have to be briefed, a summarized Gaelic football and Gaelic sports, summarize the history of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and summarize Brexit. Whereas I do think most Americans don't really have any kind of connection to Brexit. It doesn't really mean anything to them, but it was a huge deal here. Belfast voted against it, but of course it happened anyway. But the people who voted against it were their nationalists. And now it looks like there's a chance that Brexit will help fuel a united Ireland, maybe not this year, but over the next couple decades. There's a really great Chicago writer. You remember Alex Kotlowitz, that he wrote There Are No Children Here, which is like it's like the textbook if you're trying to understand Chicago poverty and that kind of thing for sociology classes. And I know Kotlowitz, I don't know him well, but I know him a little bit. And his book, he had a book called American Summer about 4 or 5 years ago. It came out the same year my book on Sean Harrington came out. And but what he did in that book, it's a really brilliant book, but it's about 7 or 8 stories, and he braids those stories together. And they all would stand up as one single magazine piece in the New Yorker. And I think maybe one of them more, he writes for the New Yorker and the Wall Street Journal. I write for the Heartland Journal, but which is arguably just as important. What Kotlowitz did in that book that was really brilliant is he braided several stories together into one larger narrative about gun violence in Chicago. It's a really terrific book. But if you go into it thinking, who's the hero of this book? Who am I rooting for? Like you root for Sean Harrington in my book. In his book, there is no one person to root for, but it gives you a great sort of a buffet, if you will, of what the violence in Chicago is like, and they're all so. That's actually the model for this one. Is I'm going to try to braid these stories together into a larger narrative about refugees and forgiveness and how sports can often bring people together.
Well, this has been great. I'm going to ask you one last question regarding Gaelic football. Who was the guy who played for you on the Tralee Tigers, who was a short order cook and a plumber, who went on to be a really hotshot Gaelic football player? Do I have this right?
Yes, well, it's an important question. His name's Kieran Donaghy. And when I had Kieran Donaghy for Gaelic football, he's a wild kid that was drinking all night and that kind of thing. But after I left and after my book, Paddy on the Hardwood, came out, he became the biggest sports star in all of Ireland. And I remember because of his success in Gaelic football. And his success in basketball helped, but he was unusual because he's a star in both sports. Maybe the best player in the country for a while and playing 2 sports, the best player in 2 sports at the same time. And I remember getting off the bus in Dublin and a bus went by and his picture was on it. And I thought he became
Not the one I took of him.
Yeah, but it was actually Kieran Donaghy who gave me the idea for this book a while back. Is he rang me about a kid in County Kerry named Stephen O'Cumber, who's playing Gaelic football. He says, you got to write about him. I said, why would I care about a guy named O'Cumber? I thought it was an Irish name. But no, it was a Nigerian name. And he was, African heritage. He was on the verge of becoming a Gaelic football star. And that he was the one who first told me, hey, there's these immigrants coming over. This is your kind of story. And I had a complicated relationship with Gaelic football because my guys would have to miss practice to go to Gaelic football. But yes, it was Kieran Donaghy. And since then, Mike, you'll be interested to know is he's maybe like a Charles Barkley character to us. He's on television all the time. He's the color analyst at halftime for Sky Sports, and he's a huge name in all of Irish sports. But it's opened a lot of doors for me is when I meet these Gaelic football fellas who can be a little bit, closed off, especially in Belfast, where the motto might as well be "say nothing." Is just they know about Kieran Donaghy and they remember my affiliation and the affiliation with basketball. So Kieran Donaghy has continued to bless me, besides being a great Irish basketball player back then and the basketball hero of my book. His success has continued to open doors for me.
Well, that's great. And without you, he probably wouldn't have had that all happen to him. So you're the key guy here. And we want to thank you for joining us for Live from the Heartland for the week of July 7th. It's great to talk to you on the 4th of July. We're going to have a cookout in the backyard. I'll be talking about this interview with them. We're going to share it with people. It'll be up on Friday. And you give my love to both Connie and Alma. And how about I get you to commit to coming on the show again in another few weeks? When you're back,
that'd be great. Good. And I do remember, Mike, last year we landed from Belfast on the 4th of July, and I turned on the Chicago Sun-Times app on my phone, and I said to Connie, turn the plane around. Let's just go home. It was that terrible incident in Highland Park. So yeah. Let's hope it's a more peaceful day in Chicago today.
Well, we're hoping. You're a hell of a guy, Russ, and I'm glad you're my friend.
Thank you. I feel the same way.
Everyone else, stay tuned. We'll be back with more Live from the Heartland. I think we have our state representative, Kelly Cassidy, coming up after a short musical break. So have a great 4th of July. Have a great Saturday. Whenever you're listening or viewing this show, we're glad you're doing it. We'll talk to you later. We'll be right back with more Live from the Heartland here on the left end of your dial. everybody. Welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of July 8th in the year 2023. This is number 160 since the start of the pandemic. And we are really honored to bring on the one, the only, my state representative, Kelly Cassidy. Good morning to you, Kelly.
Good morning. Always fun to spend a little time with you.
Well, you've been vacationing in Wyoming. Are you trying to turn Wyoming blue? What's the story?
Well, my best friend lives out there, and I go out there every year with the kids to a little town that is a little haven of semi-sanity in the middle of that place. And recently I went out to host my friend's bachelor party because while I've never been a bridesmaid, I find myself a best man. So we went out and did some hiking, and one of the members of the party got third place in a hot dog eating contest at the local bar. But your point about turning it blue gives me a chance to talk about something I've been doing since the Trump administration and our descent into madness. We can't always avoid red states or hostile states. And so when I go, I keep track of my spending, and any taxes or fees that I pay to the state, I make a donation to a pertinent organization in the state. So when I go visit my family in Florida, Equality Illinois gets a little bit of money in their coffers, and same for Wyoming. There's a donation on its way to Equality Wyoming. I call it the hate offset credit.
That's a good one. Wyoming, I believe, was the first state to have women voting.
It was. It's the equality state.
And now it's one of the most conservative states. Are there any signs of hope for blue-leaning folks that you could share with us? Any observations? Or is it...
No. Cowboy's gonna cowboy.
Yeah.
I do think that we probably will see, sort of in the more populous areas, a little bit of growth, and that may result in some electoral wins, but that's certainly a long game place. I think that in Florida, there's likely to be, at least at the local levels, for the state legislative seats, there might be some benefit to how out there DeSantis has been. So we may see some seats picked up in Florida, but I think Wyoming's a longer term strategy.
Any quick thoughts on Liz Cheney, who is from Wyoming and used to be a representative from there?
I'm fascinated by sort of the back and forth on, is she our hero? Is she not? Ultimately, she still has voted against my right to exist multiple times. So I can appreciate her standing up to Trump and still not want her anywhere near power over my life.
Well, Kelly Cassidy, when you got back from Wyoming, you I know we had to reschedule a little bit because you were going to a meeting with the president. Is there anything from that meeting where we heard a lot about Biden economics or Bidenomics? Anything you want to share for the masses of listeners and viewers here?
Sure thing. So I was one of a relatively small group of folks. It was an audience of about 50 or 60 people to the rollout of this Biden economics message, or Bidenomics message, which might speak to the challenging nature of using that phrase. But it really, it was a great speech. There's so much good to talk about that this administration has done. I think more than anything else, though, grabbing Bidenomics in this way is probably more than anything else inoculating against it being used as an attack. And I wonder if that isn't a little bit of a lesson learned from Obamacare, and maybe we should have embraced Obamacare earlier. And so that was one of the things rattling around in the old brain pan, was like, this feels a lot more like taking an attack away and getting ahead of some economic attacks than any new policy package.
Okay, well, let's go to the state legislature, because that's what you do here in Illinois.
Where I live and breathe.
You've had a lot of other jobs in your life and your time with a political bent to them all. I saw something today, probably in the New York Times, about state regulators and power coming to our houses. And I'm just curious to know, I know ComEd in our state here of Illinois has been trying to get another rate hike.
Yep.
And what do you got to share with us on that, Kelly?
I mean, let's just begin with they are the working definition of shameless. So the bill that they bribed, or the law that they bribed Madigan over, included something called formula rate, which means they don't have to come to us for rate hikes anymore. They go through the ICC, which, you know, is a mixed bag. And even then, they don't have a lot of authority over it. That was why they were willing to take such a huge risk in bribing the speaker, and so many people are now facing jail time as a result. I would like to see formula rate reversed, and I think that this is a great indicator of why it needs to be.
So we can expect that we're going to get a rate hike, though, right?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. Well, on the similar front, I remember taking a swim up in Lake Michigan and near Zion, and it was really very wonderful and beautiful unless you turned and looked at the old nuclear stacks. So Illinois had banned nuclear power plants, but there's been a move, and there's all this talk about new nuclear and small nuclear plants. And Dave Kraft has been on the show. I'm sure you've talked to him from the nuclear.
Talked to him a lot. Him and Jim Bodart, of course.
Yeah. He's great, but he's been sending out emails, about last chance to vote to get the word out to try to stop this. What's the status of bringing back nuclear plants in the great blue state of Illinois?
And I actually have to double check what ultimately happened with that bill, because that was one of the more dramatic bills back and forth towards the end of session. And, ironically enough, throughout most of session, there was a rule that you had to show you had 60 Democratic votes before the speaker would call a controversial bill or let a controversial bill be on the board. That rule was waived for this bill, which meant that you got all 47 Republicans and you only needed a handful of Democrats to send it over. This was something being pushed really, really heavily by the trades, who got a lot of they got a lot of things moved this year that maybe wouldn't have moved in prior years. This and the public-private partnership for expansion for privatized toll lanes on I-55. Both of these are environmental justice issues to me, and neither one of them should have been moved in a Democratic supermajority chamber like this. But I don't know where it landed. I think it might be sitting in the Senate.
So it hasn't happened yet.
Not yet.
Oh, that's good.
And this is one that I could see, if it got to the governor's office, I could see, or got to the governor's desk, I could see him vetoing it.
How is the governor? I mean, he certainly has performed beyond any expectations that I ever had. And I really have liked him, and I hope that you can help me get him on the show someday. But what do you think about the job he's done and his leadership, et cetera? It's
been great working with him. I mean, as you noted, you and I were not originally on the JB train. And in spite of that, he was one of the first people to speak up to defend me when I spoke out against the speaker, and has been really just an outstanding partner in all of my work, whether we're talking about criminal justice reform or LGBTQ issues or reproductive freedom issues. I really could not have asked for a more effective partner.
Any take on, I would assume that the president will need to move to the center a little bit as we near the election time. Do you think that same situation will come up for the governor? And when is the governor's election?
Well, I mean, he was just reelected.
So we don't have to worry about him moving to the right too much.
Yeah. And honestly, we didn't see him moving to the right going into reelect either, but he really leaned into pushing back on conservative approaches. He really seemed to roll around in people who were angry at him for being too progressive. So, that's something that's heartening.
Kelly Cassidy, let me ask you about one of the things we've talked about before it came into being, after it came into being, which was the legalization of marijuana. You were in the forefront of that fight. There's been an ongoing controversy, so to speak, around reefer equity, and that the people who have suffered the most from the drug or whatever we're going to call it, the flower that turns, it's like a weed that turns to a flower in your mind. And what's the status of people of color, basically, and poorer people or people who've been incarcerated around the reefer question, them getting some equity in the game?
Sure. So, I mean, as you and I have discussed several times, we had to build this on a foundation that I wasn't fond of, right? The medical program was built without any considerations for equity, actually, with the opposite of consideration for equity. It was really built as a closed loop. And so, building a new house is easier than remodeling an old house. So that we started with that challenge. We add on the challenge that this is one of the most litigious industries out there, because the benefit to them is maintaining their monopoly. So we knew we were going to have challenges. We knew that no other state had figured it out yet, and we knew that it wasn't going to be smooth. Then there were some challenges with the way the administration implemented the framework that caused more problems. But what we've seen now are a lot of licenses going out the door. Every wave since 20, I've lost track of years, but 21, I think, has been entirely social equity candidates. And so we're getting there, right? I think when we first talked about it, we talked about the fact that the estimate is that it takes 5 years for a market to mature. Honestly, I don't know when year one was for us, because it sure wasn't 2020 when we legalized, because we legalized into a pandemic where nobody could do anything. So I think we're seeing progress. It's not enough. People, are frustrated that it's not enough. And it's still, no matter what we do as a state, it's still really hard to get money to build out. It's, all of those challenges exist. And that's something that the state has minimal hand in, right? We've got the revolving loan fund and things like that help, but they are not meant to be a substitute for other investment. That's why we did a limited license setup, so that the license would have some value, so that you would have something for folks to want to invest in. But it remains a challenge, and then we've got challenges around folks selling unregulated hemp-derived THC that is, chemically altered or genetically altered, or however you want to put it, that doesn't give you that same comfort. That's not really the word I'm looking for, but that certainty of safety. There's zero regulation on it. There's no testing. There are no rules. They're selling it to minors, and that's causing some issues within the industry as well.
Has the income, the revenue from the legalization of marijuana been a help to our state?
100%. Absolutely. It has been a huge benefit to the state. And again, at a time when we really needed it. So that remains an important source of revenue, even as we are investing a lot of that revenue back into the communities that have been impacted. I've lost track of what the most recent number is, but the R3 program is constantly churning out money into neighborhoods impacted by the war on drugs for for any number of things, economic development, violence prevention, capacity building with nonprofit organizations. So there's a lot going on with that money that I'm really proud of.
Well, that sounds really good. Let's talk about guns a little bit.
Sure.
We're recording this on the 5th of July. Yesterday was the 4th of July. And we all know the horrible shooting and the deaths that took place up in Highland Park. As much as people try to legislate against guns and deal with ways to stop the plague of gun violence, it's still rampant, not only in Illinois, but throughout the country. And I'm just wondering if you see any light at the end of the tunnel, or any things that people should be aware of and supportive of in trying to make a transition from, a battlefield to being able to walk safely around in a neighborhood.
It's frustrating, honestly, and heartbreaking. Yes, a year ago yesterday, Highland Park happened, and I saw a headline that there were, I think, 2 mass shootings at 4th of July celebrations around the country, and President Biden is calling for a national ban on assault weapons. And that's one of the things we need. We need national action. This patchwork is not ever going to work until we're not going to put walls around our state. Indiana and Missouri and Kentucky are, it's like a faucet of guns. So, doing stuff at the state level is necessary, but not the end all be all. And, ultimately, we've now got a case coming up before the Supreme Court that's going to challenge red flag laws that have been a tool to get where family members or people close to someone can get guns taken away from people who are behaving in an unstable or dangerous way. And the fear is that the Supreme Court is going to overturn those red flag laws. We are up against folks who simply do not care about the loss of life.
That's a rough one. Another rough one around the country has been Pride. We have taken some really great steps forward in this country about equity for all people and whoever they want to be with. We've seen a turnaround since the Supreme Court, which you just mentioned. Banning Roe versus Wade, that put Illinois in the catbird seat, I guess. It's a special place where people can come to, but we're surrounded by states pretty much with real negative laws.
Yeah. Indiana just their ban was just upheld, so we can anticipate now we're going to get all of Indiana's patients as well.
What's your take on the success of Pride Month, the challenge of Pride and LGBT issues that we face in the country and in our state?
Pride was complicated for me this year. We watched Bud Light lean in and then run away. We watched Target lean in and then run away. It's a reminder that we are all we got. I don't care how many Pride branded bottles of Absolute vodka are out there. When the shit hits the fan, Absolute is not going to have my back, right? So coming up as a street activist, I've always been a little chuffed by the idea of corporate pride and how the parade has become, sort of a giant commercial. So that was reinforced for me even more so than usual this year. And then coming on the last day of Pride Month for the Supreme Court to just write an open invitation to, let people put up signs that says gays aren't allowed. It is a reminder of how fragile our gains are. The reality of this case that just came before the Supreme Court is that it wasn't even a real case. The plaintiff in the case had never provided the service that she was asking to be allowed to never provide. And as it turns out, they presented a fake inquiry to do the work. That a straight man who's married to a woman who had never heard of this person before was listed as the client who had asked for a gay wedding website. And there are no consequences for this. Like, we now have a Supreme Court that doesn't even care if the case is real, doesn't even care if the lawyers lied in presenting their case. They are so eager to push us back into another century. It's a bit gutting, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a rough one. And we have a big election.
And don't get me started on affirmative action and student loan relief and all of that. Like, this was a hell of a week for the Supreme Court.
Well, give me another minute on the Supreme Court and the terrible things that they've done.
Yeah, so in the course of 3 days last week, they gutted affirmative action, which is not just going to apply to colleges, right? All of these things are engraved invitations to expand. And let's be clear, they didn't gut affirmative action for donor legacy kids or
not yet. Let's hope.
Rich kids. Oh, I don't think they're ever going to gut affirmative action for the rich kids. So they remove that, and that's going to go into the workplace. It's going to go everywhere. There's no question. Then they came out with this 303 creative case on the end of public accommodation protections for LGBTQ people. That will expand as well. There's no question. It's another engraved invitation in the decision. And then they reversed President Biden's student loan relief. I think there's probably going to be an attempt at some workarounds on that. And frankly, if we win Congress next year, we can just do it legislatively. But that was certainly one that, unlike usual, millions of people were impacted and knew they were immediately because they were all thinking that they were going to get out from under some of this debt. So this is a court with a lot of enemies right now.
Yeah, it's not good, and I think that the only real hope is that we can turn out a lot of people, so we have a president elected again that's from the Democrats, and it'll probably be Biden. I don't know. There's a lot of talk about everyone wanting younger people, but it's not going to happen this time. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Kelly, let me ask you a little bit about what you see as problems that are facing us in the state that need to be addressed, that people should be aware, things coming up. And then I'm going to get to you, so we talk about a more on a national level. But here in Illinois, what's going on that we should be aware of, excited about, disappointed that it's even on the horizon, et cetera?
I think that, watching the healthcare plan for folks who are undocumented play out is one that's frustrating. That said, it is really, really expensive, and so we do need to figure out how to pay for it. But I will say, while that was going on, we were also fighting tooth and nail with our revenue committee, because every single tax credit that went into this year's budget was corporate in nature. There were no human-based tax credits. We didn't increase the earned income tax credit. We didn't create tax credits for in-migration for people coming from states that are attacking their rights. We didn't create enough housing credits, things like that. So I think that we still need a more human-centered budget.
And how are we going to do that?
I need more friends in the General Assembly, man.
That was my next question. We have an election coming up. Well, I don't know when is the next state election, but I know for the petitions will be on the street in September, and will be on the ballot in March. So do we got some people we're looking to remove and some new people to move in? And that would be true on a national level too. What's it look like for our congressional delegation? Will we pick up any more in 2024? Will we lose any? What are the challenges?
I don't know. I haven't really looked too closely. I am working with our caucus, with our House Democratic caucus, to try to help with candidate recruitment, because I am now the only openly gay member of the House. From a high water mark of 5, we're down to me. We're down to me. And so working with the Gay and Lesbian Victory Fund and our caucus, we've got a list of targets that we're going to see if we can recruit some other queer candidates to run, which would be super fun. So I'm really focused on the state house this year. So I can't really speak to what's going on with our congressional delegation yet.
We're going to, we'll run out of time sooner or later, but I'm going to keep firing them. I got one more. Let's look. It's going
to hurt you, man.
Let's look at the national scene, or just in general. What do you think people in your district, beyond the whole country, should be aware of, concerned about, excited about, and get involved in?
Honestly, we have to win the House. We have to win the U.S. House. The only path to reversing the damage is to get control of the House and retain control of the Senate. It is crucial, and literally life and death. My life. The only way we reverse this trend and figure out what to do about this court is if we have a majority in both chambers and the White House.
And what would you suggest people do on a day-to-day basis to make that happen?
You know what? Find a political organization that speaks to your heart, right? If that's an LGBTQ group, we'll hook you up. If it's around abortion, there are places for that. If it's around the environment, there are places for that. Get engaged, because they're all going to have like sister district projects going on. So if there isn't a national level race here in Illinois, there's a place where you can put your energy into a district where you can make a difference.
Kelly, give us a way.
Or join the Democratic Party, the 49th Ward, of which I am the committee person, and we'll help hook you up.
Right on, sister. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Kelly, for coming on. Is there a way that people can email you if they have praise or concerns?
Sure thing. How about we'll use the ward the ward committeeman email, so it can cross over. We don't have to worry about political emails going to the state. It's ward49cassidy@gmail.com.
Ward49cassidy@gmail.com.
Yep.
Kelly Cassidy, you're doing a great job. Keep it up. I'm glad you got reinvigorated on your trip to Wyoming, trying to turn it blue. And we'll see you in the neighborhood. We'll talk baseball, see how the kids are doing, et cetera, et cetera.
I will come by the gallery one of these weekends soon.
Yeah, I'll be there this Sunday. I hope, if the weather holds, I'll be out there.
Yeah, the weather was not kind to any of us this week.
I want to thank Kelly Cassidy as well as our first guest, Rus Bradburd. I want to call your attention to a great event going to be happening at Buddy Guy's Legends on the 14th. The bass player Charles Cross Mack, who was the bass player for James Cotton and a lot of other people, will be putting on a great show there, and he's going to be coming on the show in the not too far off, and I just wanted you to get a little taste of his music. I want to thank our guests, and I want to thank the other people who make the show possible, both Hal James and Lynn Orman. I want to encourage you all to do sports, not war. Remember that people can change. Put some effort into it, and have a great week. We'll be back with more Live from the Heartland next week. Stay tuned here on the left end of your dial, on YouTube, on podcasts, CAN TV, wherever you get the show. We're here for you, and thank you for listening in.
Are you doing the best you can? Over the mountain, under the big blue sky, you got a dream awaiting. I can see it in your eye. It may not come easy, but you know you've got a friend. I'll be by your side the entire ride. Just let me hear you say amen. Are you doing, are you doing the best you can? Tell me, are you doing, are you doing the best you can? Tout donne, est-ce que tu donnes le meilleur de toi-même parce que tu l'aimes? Tu donnes, est-ce que tu donnes le meilleur de toi-même si tu l'aimes? Tu donnes, est-ce que tu donnes le meilleur de toi-même quand tu l'aimes? Are you doing the best you can? Tell me, are you doing